If a game costs $60 and will only leave us disappointed and broke, then it's no game we want to be a part of. Unfortunately, sometimes public hype and actual gameplay are two very different things. We'll see this in some of these games, which truly had the ability to bring out rage quits and tantrums in even the most level-headed players. No one likes their emotions to be toyed with, especially when it comes to video games. Subscribe to The Gamer because we won't play around with your feelings and we'll make sure you don't get fooled by the hype. Without further ado, here are 10 video games that pissed the whole world off. No Man's Sky. If any game deserves a spot on this list, it's No Man's Sky. It had to be one of the most disappointing, overhyped games ever created, which is a travesty since gamers had high hopes for this one. What gamers were shown was completely different from what would actually be given to them. The trailer revealed alien animals moving in vast herds, tall reptiles bathing in water, and a large predator knocking down trees. Sounds pretty interesting, right? The animals are altogether one of the most disappointing aspects of the entire game. They exhibit no form of complicated behavior and fall into two categories, hostile or non-hostile. We couldn't have been more let down if we tried, especially since we had such high expectations from what we were shown in the trailer. It turns out there would be none of those things, and what we would get is a game that feels basically pointless. Most players don't enjoy the endless menus, the crafting focus, or the fact that there's no purpose at all. Also, your ship couldn't go higher than 50 meters even though we were seeing it blast off to strange, magnificent planets. This is a case of public expectation gone horribly wrong. But then again, maybe we should have been shown actual gameplay and not sensationalized cinematic effects of what could have been. Mass Effect Andromeda. This one is going to infuriate some fans of the Mass Effect series. We can't help but put it on this list. BioWare has been capable of doing so many things right, including creating captivating emotional characters that feel real, and the pacing of every game feels like a well-calculated strategy. It's all just lovingly crafted. We were really hoping the team would learn its lesson from Dragon Age Inquisition, which was such a big game, but it lacked substance. It just wasn't enough to keep the player busy. Now with Andromeda, it feels pretty similar. Most people also felt like something was off about the animations, which, to be honest, isn't much of a big deal. When you take into consideration how much time was spent on the characters in the previous Mass Effect games, it does feel like quite a letdown though. You could have spent almost the entire game with these bad animations, realizing there was no sense of immersion. Don't get us wrong, the game is definitely fun and playable even with the glitches, but we were hoping for so much more when it came to one of our favorite game series. Perhaps if the development didn't feel so rushed, we would have felt less exploited. Infinite Warfare. Apparently, when Activision apologizes for a lackluster game, they also like to point the finger at the direction of the players, stating it's us who are misunderstanding the direction the series is headed towards. Let us tip our hats to these fine ladies and gentlemen, because maybe we'll be smart enough to not fall for buying the Call of Duty label next time we know they want to change something, since it never seems to go where we want it to anyways. You can now see why the developers are going back to their old roots. It's what makes the company money, but it's also what the gamers want. And if the players aren't happy, then no one's happy. Do you know who does futuristic sci-fi well for FPS? It starts with a B and ends with an Ungi. That's right, not Call of Duty. If you want to go to the future and shoot aliens, play Halo, Borderlands, Titanfall, or any of the games from the Crysis series. Now, those are done correctly. Also, if they wanted to delve into a new genre, they should have warned us by changing the game title instead of sticking the Call of Duty label on Advanced Warfare and Infinite Warfare. These games were obviously something way different than what we anticipated. Why ruin a perfectly good thing and infuriate gamers while you're at it? Ghost Recon Wildlands. Ubisoft has created some of the best open-world games known to man. Wildlands is not one of them. If you want to see a good Ubisoft game, look at titles like The Division and Far Cry, which they created. It's easy to see why gamers are so frustrated by the sheer lack of effort on the developer's part for Wildlands. The game's story is the most useless thing we've ever come across, and we really had high expectations here because past games created by these guys have done so well in this category. The story presented in Wildlands is confusing, badly written, and altogether just useless. Any piece of information you get as the character doesn't feel pertinent to what you're actually doing, and the main antagonist is the most boring thing we've seen since sliced bread. We also had high expectations for gameplay. It felt mediocre at best. Most missions are finished within a couple of minutes. Even the gun missions, which we thought would be worthwhile and lengthier, aren't well designed and don't make up for the rest of the mediocrity. Don't get us wrong, there are some difficult missions. Stealth and hostage missions make you want to toss your television out the window, and hopefully it's a second story one so you don't have to do another one of those pointless missions. Better make it a fourth story. Thrill Kill. The world will most likely never forget Thrill Kill. The game was the first adults-only rating ever created. Sony wouldn't allow it to be published on the PlayStation due to its very graphic nature. Kids, this is not going to be one you should play. It's definitely not family-friendly. The game was originally supposed to be published by Virgin Games, but the company was bought out by EA. This made the contract between the developers and the company void and meant the game didn't have to be released in the US. EA also made certain the development team would be banned from seeking another publisher. The game was actually cancelled altogether, which infuriated the developers. This might be the first game which made gaming developers angry instead of gamers. In fact, they were so frustrated at seeing all of their hard work go down the drain, they ended up putting it on the internet so people could pirate it for free. It also turns out only the United States was so strict with this game, but it was released in other countries around the world. What's hard to remember is this was created in 1998, 6 years after the Mortal Kombat fiasco. At the time, violent video games were new to the market. Today, the game definitely wouldn't have been shelved so quickly. Flappy Bird. We can't even string these two words together in a sentence without feeling the sort of rage which should only be felt when you see a guy kicking around a harmless puppy or someone wearing socks with sandals at the beach. That's the sort of anger gamers felt when they played Flappy Bird. It was like the game brought everyone to equal terms with the fact they loved to hate themselves. It's also hard to believe that Flappy Bird was released in 2013. Has it really been 4 years since we last felt that sort of frustration from a tiny, demeaning bird? The game was highly addictive and insanely difficult, which accounted for its sudden rise in popularity even with its simplicity in gameplay. Critics despised the game, though, almost as much as we hated ourselves for playing it. It was criticized for its level of difficulty, plagiarism in graphics, and game mechanics. The game was so popular and infuriating, people who had pre-downloaded it on their phone ended up selling their phones on eBay for high prices. This ranks as one of the most highly addictive and infuriating games ever played on a mobile device. The Great Giana Sisters. One game which flat out plagiarized another was the Great Giana Sisters, and for the first time in history, Nintendo was more angry than gamers, parents, and developers combined. The Great Giana Sisters is a 2D platformer literally ripped off the ideas of Super Mario Bros. The environment contains mushrooms, cobblestone walls, and even characters with similar names. Trust us, Giana and Mario are not far off from Luigi and Mario. The person who named them really wasn't trying too hard. In this game, the player takes the role of Giana, whose last name is Giana. Sound familiar? Probably does. Mario from Super Mario Bros.' last name is also Mario. That means his name is Mario Mario. This is just flat-out plagiarized in Giana Sisters, but at least they had the decency to add an extra N to the last name so it differs at least slightly. Although this may have been a typo on the cover art, and we wouldn't be surprised. Giana suffers from a nightmare where she travels through 32 dungeons full of monsters, while collecting diamonds instead of coins, so that's a relief. All while she's looking for her sister, Mario. There's no Princess Peach or Bowser in sight. There are some pretty strange enemies, though, including owls, rolling eyeballs, flesh-eating fish, and deadly insects. Weird. Battleborn. Listen, for the company which brought us the Borderlands series, we weren't asking for much here. If you can keep us on the edge of our seat with amazing characters and gameplay, then what on earth happened in Battleborn? First, you make us sit through the longest intro known to man, which we might add is the longest introduction to a game we've ever experienced. There's no escaping it. We are there whether we want to be or not, and once you get out of the exceptionally long intro sequence, you might think, okay, I'm safe now, let's try the tutorial. Don't do it. If we could repeat this 10 times, we would. It's exactly as exasperatingly long and drawn out as the intro was. We get it. Tutorials are meant to be soul-sucking for absolute beginners, but really, it would be nice if this was cut in half. The long wait times to get into a public game felt excruciatingly painful as well. No game should require a 30-plus minute wait time. Not even the old days of World of Warcraft made its players suffer so long waiting for raids. The infinite wait times need to stop. Just group us with some AIs and let us enjoy the good things about the game, like the hilarious dialogue and the cool science fiction story. Final Fantasy XIV Online. Playing this game made me feel like I was reliving the dark and horrific terrors of Final Fantasy XIII. This game should have also made the list for horrible gameplay since it was more like a cinematic movie experience than a legitimate game. Thanks for doubting our gaming abilities, Square Enix. We definitely thought the horror would end with FF13. Unfortunately, we were wrong, because then Final Fantasy XIV Online came out. It wasn't all bad. The graphics were out of this world, and the music was like angelic babies flew down to play a string quartet made especially for you. Those things did not make up for all the stuff that went terribly, terribly wrong. The game was a massive failure. It looked good on the outside, but once you took a closer look, you realized how unfinished the product was as a whole. You can't just make something pretty and expect it to appease gamers if there's no real substance. Complaints and the reviews of the game ended up being so awful, Square Enix was forced to pull the plug on it. This is how we ended up with Final Fantasy XIV, A Real Reborn. This one took 3 years to create, and it just should have been done this well in the first place. Star Wars Battlefront. Remember how we talked about not dangling pretty objects in gamers' faces and expecting them to grab it without any substance? Yes, we were mainly thinking about Star Wars Battlefront. There was a lot riding on this game, and it had all the ingredients to be truly groundbreaking. But you know what happened? EA got greedy, plain and simple. The company wanted DICE to produce the game before the release of Star Wars: The Force Awakens. That was the first mistake they made. The second mistake was that it's a shallow game and the multiplayer feels subpar. The game didn't deliver any real great content, and we're truly hoping EA will make up for this blunder in Star Wars Battlefront 2. The game catered to our nostalgic drive, and we really wanted to love it. It is one of the prettiest FPS games ever released, hands down. The graphics are outstanding, but the content doesn't really match current multiplayer FPS title standards of what we've come to expect from great games. The lack of story made it even more difficult to enjoy. It kind of felt like they weren't even trying, which got old really fast, and was pretty obvious if you had played the game longer than a few hours. Well, that's all for our list. What games made you feel like giving up your favorite hobby? Were there any games which pissed you off that we might have missed? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we hope you won't give up on gaming just because of a few bad titles in the bunch. Subscribe to us and we'll help you sort out the good guys from the bad, at least in terms of video games. Have a good one.